Hi everyone, my name is Gary Pretty. I'm a Senior Program Manager on the Conversational AI team at Microsoft. Delighted to be here with you today, and over the course of the next hour we're going to be talking about how we can build sophisticated virtual assistants using the Microsoft Conversational AI platform. Over the course of that time, if you want to ask questions, please do ask them in the chat and I'll be around to answer them as we go along, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So let's dive in. The first thing I wanted to call out is the fact that we think conversations and conversational applications are really the next big wave, a big paradigm shift in how we interact with computers. We've had PCs, the age of the internet and mobile. All three of these things happened pretty rapidly and made a fundamental change in our everyday lives. To the point now where they are pervasive and we don't really think about that they're there, but they are deeply woven into everything that we do. And we think that conversational applications is going the same way. We've seen an explosion in the number of applications out there over the last couple of years, and we think that's only going to increase. Gone are the days where I should need to buy a book to understand what commands I need to type into a computer or the specific syntax I need to know. Certainly as an everyday person and not a developer, non-technical folks shouldn't need to learn those commands, and more the expectation is exactly that. They think that they should just be able to engage with computers in the same way that they engage with friends and family and colleagues, and that's really where conversational AI applications come in. And in order to build those, we need a framework to allow us to actually achieve some of those objectives, because these applications really need to be natural and engaging in order to be effective. And to light that scenario up and to allow us to build these applications, there's the Microsoft Conversational AI platform. So let's have a look at that sort of from end to end. Everything starts with user input. Traditionally, over the last couple of years, that's mostly been via text, but more and more we're seeing speech and other types of input. Speech is becoming a very key piece to conversational AI applications. Things like telephony, IVR systems making use of things like natural language processing. But really, you're taking some input from a user, and that's on one or more channels. Those channels could be internal facing, to your employees, so they could be things like Microsoft Teams, they could be via Slack, they could be via web chat in the corporate intranet. Or they could be external facing, so applications that are interacting with consumers, customers, the general public. That could be via web chat on a website, it could be via a home assistant, for example, like Alexa or Google. On the back of this though, once you actually have a user communicate on one of these channels, we need to build a conversational application to surface some capabilities behind it, to what's going to happen on the other end. And for that we have the Bot Framework SDK. Now, Bot Framework SDK has been around now since around 2016, has seen its incredible growth over the last few years. Even just in the time between Microsoft Build earlier this year and then Microsoft Ignite that happened in September, we saw a doubling of the number of messages that went through these channels, from 1.25 billion a month to 2.5 billion messages a month, which I just find is pretty crazy. Bot Framework SDK allows us to build these rich applications, and it's available in 4 languages: .NET, Node.js, Python and Java. And then finally, we bring in cognitive services. The Bot Framework SDK allows us to build a conversational application to control that conversational flow between the user's input and then responding to that via those channels. But then we also have cognitive services. The cognitive services suite, in particular, things like language understanding, the speech service, and things like Q&A Maker, allow us to interact with users incredibly naturally, understanding their intent, extracting entities from the things that they say so that we can really tailor our response depending on their input, answering frequently asked questions, and handling automatic text-to-speech and speech-to-text for those speech-based scenarios such as telephony, for example. And then on top of the Bot Framework SDK, we have 2 options from a Microsoft Conversational AI perspective. And really they work very well together, and where you start really depends on the audience. We have Microsoft Power Virtual Agent, which is part of the Power Platform. And this is really suited to business users and citizen developers. And it's a no-code tool to allow you to rapidly build conversational AI applications very, very easily and very, very quickly. On top of that, we have Microsoft Bot Framework Composer. Again, just like Power Virtual Agents, this is built on the Bot Framework SDK. And Bot Framework Composer is our visual IDE for developers and multidisciplinary teams. Has some similar features to Microsoft Power Virtual Agents, but actually will then allow you as a developer to build on top of that with more complex scenarios, including working directly with the Bot Framework SDK if you need to. The two actually work incredibly well together, so you can start in Microsoft Power Virtual Agents and then extend those PVA solutions using Bot Framework Composer and the SDK if you want to. And if we get time, we'll have a quick look at that later on. Okay, to really drive this home over the course of the next hour, I want to walk through a fictional scenario, but I sometimes think it helps to really ground what we're thinking about in a real world scenario. And we're going to talk about a company called Tailwind Traders. And they've recently been doing some employee surveys to try and understand, certainly in the age of 2020, when everybody's working from home, how's everyone doing, how are they feeling, what's going well and what's not. And they found out that actually their employees still think that their career progression opportunities are top-notch, and they're really, really happy with those. But one thing that they are seeing at Tailwind Traders, and enterprises and businesses of all sizes are seeing all over the world at the moment, are the fact that employees get frustrated with the sort of cumbersome, outmoded processes, such as the ability to raise vacation requests. When everybody was in an office, it was still cumbersome. Folks would have to go to a printer, print out a form, manually fill the form out, take it to a manager, have the manager sign it, go and put it in somebody else's tray on their desk, and it was a very manual process. Now that they're at home, it's even more difficult, and they're having to do this via sending emails between lots of people, and it's just a bit of a pain to manage. And on top of everything else, it's just it's taking up time. The same thing goes for getting answers to sort of what should be very easy questions. There is an FAQ page on the website where they can go and get answers to those frequently asked questions, but they have to scroll through all of the questions. They have to find the most appropriate answer for them, and it's just not straightforward. And so we're going to see if we can use conversational AI to build a virtual assistant for the Tailwind Traders employees to help them improve some of these processes. Okay, so today, in order to do that, we're going to focus on Bot Framework Composer. Again, that's the developer-focused IDE that we spoke about earlier. So now let's switch over to Bot Framework Composer and start to build up our virtual assistant and see if we can start to solve some of these problems. Okay, so if you've not got Composer yet, you can head on over to dev.botframework.com. And here you'll find a link to download Composer right now. You can download it for Windows, Mac or Linux, and it's also available in GitHub as an open source web application, which means that you can either use it as an Electron application or you can deploy it centrally within your organization so that you can access it via a browser. Once you've downloaded it, open it up and you're going to find yourself on this home screen. On the home screen, I can see the bots that I've had open recently. I can see example bots which are available for me to explore different concepts and different things that I can do with Composer. There's some video tutorials for you to get started with. But right now, I want to start creating an assistant for our Tailwind Traders employees. And this assistant is going to help them with booking vacation, answering frequently asked questions, etc. So I go ahead and create new. I'm going to create a bot from scratch rather than choose a template. I'm going to call this the DPS bot and click OK. And when I do that, it's going to go ahead and create my bot for me. Then I'm presented with the Composer Designer. And really one of the key things to understand about bots that you build with Composer are that they are driven primarily by triggers and actions, and that's how you build up the functionality for your bot. Triggers allow you to respond to external activities, such as somebody starting a conversation or a message being received, and actions are the things that happen in response to a trigger when it fires. I can add new triggers on my bot by clicking the add button on the toolbar, adding a new trigger. And here I can see a list of different triggers that I can add to my bot. I actually get a built-in greeting trigger available to me. For any bot that you create in Composer, the greeting trigger will be created for you. And this trigger fires when somebody joins the conversations, and Composer automatically adds the actions necessary for you to send the user a welcome message. So in this case, I want to welcome users to using the application, and so here I can go ahead and change the default welcome message and say, "Hi, welcome to the Tailwind Traders assistant." But over here I can also do something to make the conversation feel a bit more natural. What I don't want to do is have the same message output over and over again if somebody uses the bot multiple times. And what I'm entering here isn't just text, it's something called language generation, or LG. And what that means is I can actually supply or specify multiple variants of the same message. So here we could say something like, "Hello and welcome to the assistant for Tailwind Traders." And what will happen is each time somebody uses the bot and starts a conversation, the bot will pick randomly from one of these two variants of the welcome message. You could add many more variants if you wanted to, and having this built in makes the bot feel less stale if it's used over and over again. This was a common problem with early bots, which just sounded very, very static and got old pretty quickly. So now that I've specified my welcome message, I want to add another trigger, and this one is a help trigger. So anytime somebody using my bot wants help, they want to understand what they can do, I want to be able to send them a message telling them how they can interact with the bot. So I'm going to add a new trigger, and this time I'm going to pick from the list of available ones, I'm going to pick intent recognized. And this is really the most common type of trigger that you're likely to use when building a bot. This is where we deeply integrate with the language understanding cognitive service, and we are able to recognize the intent of the user when they send a message. So either they need help, or for example, further down the line, we want to be able to understand if they want to book a vacation or get answer to a question. So here I'm going to add a new trigger called help. And then I need to provide some trigger phrases, and these are examples of what a user might say if they're looking for help. So for example, we could say help, or what can I say? What can you do? And I could add more examples on top of this, but right now I'm just going to provide a few examples just to show the concept. Once I click that, it adds me a new trigger over here on the left hand side. You can see the trigger phrases over here on the right, and this is our property pane where we do a lot of editing inside of Composer. And if I want to add more or edit those trigger phrases, I can do it here at any time. And I've now got a blank canvas in front of me where I can start to add actions. Composer has lots of different actions, such as sending a basic response that we saw with the greeting trigger. We can ask some questions, open questions, numbers, date, time, multi-choice, etc. We can even access external resources, such as sending a HTTP request and doing something with the result. All I want to do for my help message, though, my help intent, if somebody asks for help, is send them a message back, allowing them to understand how they can interact with the bot. So to do that, I'm going to send a simple response, and I'm going to paste in a message that I wrote earlier. And you can see here it's going to tell the user that the bot can answer FAQs and help them with tasks such as booking vacation, and give them an example of how they can talk to the bot. So that's great. So I've now got a bot that will provide the user with a welcome message when they first join the conversation, and if they ask for help, it will provide them with a standard message, allowing them to understand how they can interact and carry out further activities. We've not added anything else to our bot yet, but actually I want to make sure that this bot is working. So I can go over here and click Start Bot. The first thing it's going to do is pop up and ask me for a Lewis authoring key, or a language understanding authoring key. And this is for a service that you create over in the Azure portal. So here I've created a language understanding cognitive service instance, and I'm going to copy the key that I'm provided with from here, and I'm just going to paste that into Composer. And when I click OK, what's actually going to happen is you can see that the bot says it's publishing. And what that means is it's actually going to create my language understanding model for me using the trigger phrases that we created earlier for the help intent. And it's going to create a help intent inside of our language understanding model. And it's that model and the language understanding service that will be used when a message is sent by a user. It will use that model to determine whether or not it finds a matching intent. Now, for those of you who've built bots with the SDK before Composer was available, you may remember that you used to have to go to the language understanding service portal to actually create and manage your model manually in there. But now we've brought that and deeply integrated it inside of Composer so that you create your language model in context. The first time we run our bot, we'll get a message around the firewall. We want to allow our bot through the firewall, so we'll enable access. I can then go ahead and click Test in Emulator over here on the right hand side. And that's going to open up the bot framework emulator, and this is where we can test our bot. So you can see here that the conversation has started and we've been presented with our welcome message. It says, "Hi, welcome to the Tailwind Traders Assistant." If I click Restart Conversation a couple of times, you'll notice that actually on the third time it said, "Hello and welcome to the Assistant for Tailwind Traders." Just showing you there that the bot is randomly picking between one of those two variations that we entered earlier on in the sender response action. I can then go ahead and type help, and the bot will actually recognize that my intent is to get help. I could have said, "What can you do?" The bot's actually going to see that it matches the help intent that's been created in our Lewis model, and over here on the right hand side we get this event list of events that are actually happening in the background. And if I click on the trace for the Lewis call, you can see here that our the text help matched our help intent with a score of around 96%. And therefore Composer executed the actions associated with that trigger. Okay, so let's jump back into Composer. The next thing I want to add to the assistant is the ability for a user to ask to book some vacation. To do that, I need to go ahead and add a new trigger, give it a name, and then provide some example phrases that they might use. Book vacation. If you're in the UK like me, it would be book a holiday, book some time off. We do that, and again we get a blank canvas. This time I'd like to send them a quick message to say, "Okay, let's get started." But now I want to actually take some information from the user about their vacation request. So to do that, I can use the Ask a Question actions that are included within Composer. First of all, let's ask them, when is their vacation due to start? Just like when I'm sending a response, I can enter a prompt over here on the right hand side. But unlike sending a response, this time I need to actually store the reply from the user somewhere. So over here, by selecting this second part of the action, I have a property input box. And here I can provide a variable name for where I want to store the user's reply inside the state of the bot so that I can use it later. So for example, I could say dialog.startDate. And that means that later on I can access that dialog.startDate to actually get the date that the user replies with. I'm then actually going to copy this prompt, and I can do that. I can actually copy actions, cut them, move them, and delete them. I'm going to copy it because I also want to be able to get the end date of the user's vacation. So I can change the prompt. And this time, instead of storing it in start date, I'm going to store it in end date. Next thing I want to do is ask them about the type of vacation that they're booking. So now I'm going to use a multi-choice prompt. Again, I need to provide some text for the user. But this time, as well as providing a property where I want to store the result, this time I'll call it dialog.type, I also want to provide some choices for the user to pick from. I can use simple choices. I can add more information by providing structured choices if I want to. But this time I'm just going to use some simple choices, and the choices will be annual leave and sickness and other. Finally, I want to give the user the option to provide some comments. Okay, so I've now used the inbuilt prompts inside of Composer to build up some questions for the user, asking them for their start date, their end date, the type of vacation, and some comments to go with their request. Next, I want to give the user the option to confirm whether or not the details they've entered are correct or not. If they say they are, then we'll go ahead and make the request. If they say they aren't, then we need to allow them to re-enter the information. To do that, I'm going to use a different type of input prompt, this time a confirmation prompt. Again, I need to provide some text for the prompt. But this time, not only am I asking them a question, are these details correct, but I also want to replay the information back to the user that they've just entered. And to do that, I can use this special dialog, this special dollar notation. And you can see here that I'm actually referring to the 4 variables that I've stored so far as part of this set of actions: dialog.startDate, dialog.endDate, dialog.type, and dialog.comments. I can simply include them in here, and at runtime it will take the value of those variables in state at the time, and it will place them into the prompt that gets output to the user. You can also see that I've used some markdown syntax to make certain parts of my message bold and create new lines as well. The next thing I need to do, as well as storing the reply into a variable, so in this case dialog.confirm, is to actually branch my code. So if the user says yes, the details are correct, I need to do one set of actions, and if they say no, then I need to let them re-enter the information. And to do that, I'm going to use a condition action, in this case the if-else condition. For an if-else condition, what I need to provide is an expression. And for an expression, I can use what we call our adaptive expression syntax. And there are lots of pre-built functions that allow me to do comparisons, etc., to build up these conditions. And the one that I need right now is relatively simple. I want to say, is my dialog.confirm value equal to true? If that condition resolves to true, then the actions within the true branch will be executed. So here I can say, okay, submitting your request. If they say no, they're not correct, then I can send a response and say, okay, let's start again. The other thing I can do if they say they aren't correct is I can add what we call a dialogue management action to repeat this dialogue. And a dialogue is simply the collection of actions that I'm working within at the moment. So if I say repeat this dialogue, so if the user says no, those values aren't correct, we'll go down the false branch. We'll send them a message saying, okay, let's start again. We'll call a repeat this dialogue action, and we'll actually execute all of these actions again. All right, now let's restart our bot. Restarting the bot is going to take the new intent that we've added for book vacation and the trigger phrases that we created for it. It's going to add them to our natural language model in the language understanding service, and it's going to restart our bot ready for testing. Once the bot restarts, we can switch back over to the emulator. And once we're in the emulator, we can restart our conversation. And now we can say book vacation to test out our new flow. So the bot correctly recognizes, using the Lewis service, that we actually want to book vacation, 94% accurate on the book vacation intent, and so it's executing our actions. This time it's got past the first couple of actions, and now it's awaiting me to provide a reply. So it's saying, when is your vacation starting? Another great thing about the datetime prompts is we can actually use the inbuilt datetime recognizers in the Bot Framework SDK, and it will automatically turn natural language for date times, so such as me saying tomorrow, for example, and it will resolve that to tomorrow's date. I could then say next Wednesday as the end date. I then get some suggested actions for the type of vacation. Because I've provided a limited set of choices, there's no point having the user have to type everything in. So if we know that their response needs to be one of a number of options, then we can provide them with these what are called suggested actions. And that happens automatically when I use the multi-choice prompt. So here I'm going to pick annual leave. And finally it's saying, do you have any comments for your request? I say no. And it says, are these details correct? And we can see actually that it's resolved those two dates correctly for me, the 23rd of November and the 25th of November. It's also specified my correct type, annual leave, and it's got my comments. The markdown syntax that I used earlier has also formatted my message correctly for me. Again, because the bot knows that my response needs to be yes or no, it's provided me with those suggested actions. So I can go ahead and say, yes. The bot will then say, okay, submitting your request, because the true set of actions were submitted. But what if our user had wanted to change some pieces of the information that they've entered? Well, let's go back and have a look and see what happens then. Using the Bot Framework emulator, here's a useful tip. You can actually go back to a previous point in your conversation. You can say restart the conversation from here by selecting one of the previous messages that were sent in by the user, in this case me, and I can restart the conversation and it will replay all of my previous messages, and now I'm back at the point where the user is being asked, are these details correct, yes or no? Now in this case, because I would like to change the comments, for example, I could just say no and it would restart the flow as per the actions that we entered inside of Composer. But it would be much more natural if I could just say something like change the comment to long weekend. If you think about it, when you are interacting with other human beings and they say, are these details are correct, you don't always just say yes or no. You might actually just go ahead and say, change this detail to a different value. You go ahead and tell them what's wrong, rather than taking it in sequential stages. Let's try that with this bot. Well, you can see here the bot doesn't understand. The bot was expecting yes or no, because the question that we'd asked was, are these details correct? And we used a confirmation prompt. It would be incredibly more natural for the user simply to be able to say, change the comment to long weekend, or move my start date to Wednesday, move my end date to next week. So let's see how we can enable that inside of Composer. Alright, so now that I'm back in Composer, the first thing I want to do is actually prepare for my bot getting slightly more complex, and I'm going to take all of the actions that are underneath this trigger. I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to move them. And we spoke about dialogues before, the idea of grouping actions together. And actually what I can do is I can take a set of actions and I can move them specifically into their own dedicated dialogue over here on the left hand side. And now you can see all of our actions are inside of this dialogue, and our book vacation trigger is simply calling that new book vacation dialogue. That also means that our book vacation actions and dialogue is now reusable and can be called from anywhere else inside of our bot. Alright, there's another reason I've done that as well, and that's to help us solve this interruption problem. So if you think about it, the bot is currently expecting a yes or a no answer to our confirmation prompt, but the user is effectively going to interrupt, something that is very natural for humans to deal with, but not something that's so natural for the bot. So how can we enable this? Well, firstly, on the prompt for confirmation, we can head over to the prompt configuration, scroll down, and we'll find that there is an allow interruptions property currently set to false, but I'm going to set it to true. If we enable allowing interruptions on a prompt, what that actually means is that when the input comes back in, the answer comes back in from the user to that prompt, it could be taken over by one or more of the triggers on the left hand side. Instead of simply expecting yes or no, the bot will first check to see if the input matches one of those triggers. And so now that I've actually got a book vacation dialog, I can actually add a new trigger, this time a nested trigger, specifically on the book vacation dialog. And I can call that edit comment. And my trigger phrases would be edit this comment, change the comment, anything that the user might say in order to indicate that they want to change the comment. And we can the trigger can fire instead of the user saying yes or no. If they say edit this comment, this trigger will fire because we've enabled interruptions on that prompt. Another thing that we can do here to really make things natural for the user is we can actually start to add natural language entities into our trigger phrases. So for example, I could say change the comment to, and then I can have the name of an entity, and I can have the text of the entity, the value. So change the comment to long weekend, edit the comment to comment well-deserved break. The only other thing we have to do in order to enable LUIS, or the language understanding service, to recognize that entity is actually indicate what type of entity it is. And here we're going to say this is a machine learned entity, and it's going to be called comment. And that's going to add a machine learned entity to our natural language model so that it can automatically be extracted when the user sends a message to our bot. We'll go ahead and click submit, and you can see that it's added our trigger phrases here. What I need to do now is add the prompt for the user to change the comment. So here we'll ask another question, and this time it will be a text prompt, just like it was for our first comment prompt in the original dialogue. What would you like to change the comment to? So we're asking the user to enter a new value for the comment. And here I'm going to say dialog.newComment. I want to store it in another variable. The other thing I can do here is I can actually now use special @ notation to tell the prompt that actually if it finds that a comment has been extracted by our natural language model, and we find an entity, a value for the entity comment, which we have specified inside of our trigger phrases, @comment allows us to refer to the entity inside of the natural language recognizer result. And so if an entity is found on the way in when the message is received, we're going to take that and we're going to preset the value for this prompt, which means that it will be skipped. Let's go ahead finally, and we're going to use what we call our set a property action. And here we're going to say I want to set the dialog.comment property, which we were setting in our original flow, and I want to set the value here to dialog.newComment. So at this point we're now saying I want to override my original comment with the new comment that I've either just accepted or was extracted for us using natural language recognition. Okay, once this flow has finished executing, if the edit comment triggers fires, it will then jump back to the point at which the trigger was executed, and it should reprompt me and ask me for confirmation of the details being correct, but this time the comment should have been updated. Let's give that a go. Back in the emulator, we can see here that we are back at the point where the user had previously tried saying change the comment to long weekend, and we've been reprompted because the bot was expecting yes or no. Let's go and replay the conversation again back to the confirmation prompt, and we'll try it again. This time I'm reprompted straight away, but notice that it's actually changed the comment to long weekend instead of simply reprompting me with the same set of details. That's because our new trigger, the edit comment trigger, was fired. I said change the comment to long weekend, and the bot correctly used the natural language model inside the landing understanding service to infer that my intent was to edit the comment. But not only that, but it automatically extracted, using that machine learned entity, the text long weekend. That meant the new prompt inside of our new edit comment dialog was skipped, the value was set overwriting the old comment, and I've now been reprompted, to which I can now answer yes. And my vacation request could then be registered. Jumping back over to Composer at this point, obviously one thing to call out is the fact that right now I'm simply saying, okay, submitting your request. I'm not actually sending it anywhere. I could use a send a HTTP request if I wanted to actually submit those details and send them off to, for example, an Azure function, or maybe even integrate with a third-party HR system that I'm using. Okay, so that's one of my key use cases dealt with, and I've added some really sophisticated behavior so that my bot can handle interruptions as part of that, meaning they can actually now very naturally engage with the bot to raise a vacation request. And don't forget, we also added the ability earlier to allow the user to ask for help. The next use case I'd like to add is the ability for the bot to answer frequently asked questions. To do that, I'm going to make use of the Q&A Maker service. Q&A Maker is a cognitive service that sits alongside the other cognitive services, such as language understanding, that we've been using so far with our intent recognized triggers to determine the intent of a user's message when it's received. Q&A Maker enables us to take existing FAQ data held in websites or documents such as Word documents and PDFs and extract the questions and answers into what are called knowledge bases that are held inside the service. And once those knowledge bases have been created, we can submit queries, effectively users' questions, against that service, and it will use the machine learning model that's been built for us using that data to present the user with the most appropriate answer. For Tailwind Traders, I've already got a Tailwind Traders employee FAQ document here around vacation, and it has a number of questions in around that users might want to get answered on a day-to-day basis. Today they need to know that this page exists and they need to come and search it manually, but it'd be great to add this capability to our bot so that the bot can answer the question for us. So I'm going to take a copy of this URL and I'm going to switch back over to Composer. And what we can do now is, just like we added triggers to our bot, we can now add a new knowledge base to our bot. We can give the knowledge base a name, and I can add the URL of the FAQ page as the knowledge source. And when I click Create KB, that will actually start to extract the questions and answer pairs from that web page and create a local knowledge base within our bot. Once the knowledge base is ready, I can navigate over to the Q&A section over on the left hand side of Composer, and I can now see that all of those FAQ pairs have been collected for me. They've been extracted using the Q&A Maker service, and they are now available within a knowledge base in my bot. I can make some edits. I can add new Q&A pairs, I can remove Q&A pairs, and I can even add alternative phrasing. So for example, instead of the user saying, "What does WOB stand for?" they might say, "What does WOB mean?" And we can add more variants to question and answer pairs to effectively improve the accuracy of the model. As well as creating the knowledge base for me, we also had a special type of trigger added to the bot automatically for us, Q&A intent recognized. So this time, this trigger will fire not if an intent is recognized using our language understanding model, but it will be triggered if the Q&A model, if the bot believes the Q&A model has an appropriate answer for the user's question, if it recognizes that on the incoming message. And you automatically have the actions added to take advantage of some more complex features that are available within Q&A Maker, such as multi-turn question and answer prompts. Now that I've added this, I don't need to do anything else to start taking advantage of it. I can go ahead and tell my bot to restart. And notice now, as well as providing the Lewis authoring key, I need to provide a Q&A subscription key. That's because I need to head over to Azure and create a Q&A Maker resource. which I've already done. Now that I've created it, I can copy the key, I can head back over to Composer and put the key in, click OK, and our bot will now be restarted, our language model will be republished, and our new Q&A knowledge base will be published for the first time into the Q&A Maker service. Once our bot's published, I'm going to just jump over to the Q&A Maker portal again, where I can go to the My Knowledge Bases page, and this shall show me the knowledge bases that exist within my Q&A Maker service. As you can see, a new knowledge base with the name DPS bot Composer has been created for us by Composer when it was restarting the bot. If I click through into that knowledge base and scroll down, I can see the list of questions and answers are the questions and answers that were extracted for me from the FAQ page and are now held locally within Composer. That's fantastic. So now that the bot's been restarted, let's jump on over to the Bot Framework emulator and see if it's working. I've got the welcome message because I've started a new conversation and it's triggered the greeting intent. I'm now going to type help just to make sure that our natural language model and our intent recognized triggers are still working, and they are because I've received the help message in response to the help intent being recognized. And now I'm going to ask a question that should be answered by my knowledge base. What does WOB mean? If you remember, that was one of the alternative phrasings that we added to our model. And almost instantly I get the answer work on behalf of, because our knowledge base has returned that as an appropriate answer for our user. So that's fantastic. Let's jump back over to Composer and just remind ourselves of what we've actually done so far. We set out to create a virtual assistant for Tailwind Traders employees to help them in their everyday, day-to-day work. The first thing we did was we configured the greeting trigger to provide them with a welcome message, and that trigger is fired when somebody joins the conversation. We then configured a help trigger using the intent recognized trigger type, and this started to create our natural language model using our trigger phrases, and we returned an appropriate response to users if they asked for help. Then we created a book vacation trigger, and we grouped some actions inside of a book vacation dialog. And we used lots of different types of prompts that were available to us within Composer to actually accept information from a user, storing that information in state as we went along. And then we provided them with a formatted confirmation message. And then depending on their answer to that confirmation message, we had some conditional logic to determine what happened next. We also created a nested edit comment trigger, which would allow us to allow the user to interrupt during the book vacation dialog to actually make a change to the comment if they wanted to, if they'd made a mistake. You could also add additional triggers such as edit start date, edit end date to really fill out this scenario and allow the user to effectively go backwards and forwards in that dialogue until they've completed and they confirm that they've got all of the details right. Finally, we created a Q&A intent by importing our knowledge base from the FAQ page, and then we've just tested that and that's working. So already in just around 45 minutes, we've created an incredibly sophisticated bot very, very quickly using Composer without writing any custom code. Now that we've created some of our key use cases, it's now a great time to actually publish this bot and get it into the hands of actual users to start gathering some feedback. And so I can actually use Composer to publish this bot out into Azure. I can head over to the publishing section, and from here I can add a new publishing profile. I can choose the type, provide it with a name, and drop in my publishing configuration. Composer contains all of the necessary instructions for you to actually provision your resources in Azure, and will also help you out with that as well. We're also making some improvements to that in an imminent upcoming release as well. To save time, I've actually gone ahead and created a new publishing profile, and this one will actually deploy my bot out to an Azure App Service. So I can select the publishing profile, click Publish to Selected Profile, provide a comment, click OK, and publishing will start. Composer is now building my bot locally, and then it's going to publish that up into an Azure App Service. While that's happening, let's just jump over to Azure and have a look at the resources that I actually provisioned with Composer's help. We can see here that we've got a bot channels registration resource. This is what connects our bot to the channels, and we're going to see that in a moment once publishing is completed, and I'll show you how you can wire up some channels really quickly in a couple of minutes. We've got a Cosmos DB instance, which is used to hold our bot's state once it's been deployed to Azure. So far, when we've been using it locally, all of the state's been held in memory. We've got application insights, and this allows you to actually enable rich telemetry so that you can understand how your users are actually using the bot. We can understand the types of messages that are being received, how many users there are, etc. We've got the app service where the actual application is deployed to. And then finally, we've got a Lewis resource to store our language model as well. Back in Composer, I can now see that publishing is completed. So let's switch back over to Azure and those resources that we were just talking about. And I'm going to click this time into the bot channels registration. I mentioned earlier, this is essentially what connects your bot application with the channels that your users can interact with it on. There's a few things that we can do in here. We can get access to some basic analytics about our bot's usage, so we can understand how many people are using the bot on a day-to-day basis. We can test the bot. So now that the bot's been deployed to Azure, we can actually test that the bot is working. Here you can see that the welcome message is presented, and if I restart this conversation, we should be able to test that we are getting the multiple variants of the welcome message. There we go. I've got my other variant, hello and welcome to the assistant for Tailwind traders. And all of the things that we've tried inside the emulator will work here as well. So I can type help. The help intent will be triggered because the help intent was matched, so the action to send our help message is executed. Now that I've tested my deployed bot is working, I now want to enable it on one or more channels so that users can actually try it and provide me with some feedback. To manage the channels that the bot is registered with, I can head over to the channels blade. Here we can see a list of channels that I can actually enable the bot on. Web chat is enabled automatically for us, and this experience would be very similar to the experience that you've just seen in the test area of the bot registrations resource. You can actually take that, and we have an open source web chat control which you can embed inside of a website. We can also now enable that bot into channels such as Microsoft Teams, maybe even on a home assistant such as Alexa, and it's really straightforward to actually start adding these channels. So I'm going to go ahead and actually enable this bot in Teams. To do that, I click on the Teams icon, and then I start getting some instructions in terms of how I can configure the bot. Actually, all I want to do here is I want to enable the channel, so I'm just going to hit save. I'm going to agree to the terms of service. Okay, and now that has saved my Teams configuration. If I go back to the channels blade, I can now see that Teams is enabled and it's running. If I click on that, my bot is then opened for me in Teams, and I can actually test it. So let's go ahead and talk to it. What does WOB mean? So it's actually, I've joined the conversation, so it's said hi, welcome to the Tailwind Traders Assistant, and it's now provided me with an answer. I can now use that again to start asking for help, to understand what else I can do with it, and I can even start booking some vacation time. You can see there just how quickly I was able to register the bot within Teams and immediately start testing it. Okay, so let's flip back to our slide deck and actually just summarize what we've been doing over the last 50 minutes and provide some calls to action so that you can go and try this yourself. In just under an hour, we were able to create a pretty sophisticated virtual assistant that was connected to a knowledge base that could answer frequently asked questions. We saw how to use multiple different types of prompts and built-in bot memory and state to actually take information from the user. We saw how to use triggers to actually handle really quite complex conversational paradigms such as interruptions as well. And really, we've just scratched the surface. Finally, we showed you how you could actually deploy that bot from Composer straight into Azure, start testing that within Azure, and then almost immediately start communicating with the bot via another channel, such as Microsoft Teams. If you want to get started with Composer today, you can head on over to aka.ms/trycomposer. We'd love you to go and try it, and any feedback is always welcome. We do have an upcoming release in December for Composer, which will make some even more improvements, and then we've got a whole range of improvements planned for the first half of 2021. You can also head on over to aka.ms/AIML40, and that's going to take you to MS Learn and some MS Learn content for the Bot Framework SDK. Really appreciate you spending the time with me today to learn about Bot Framework and Composer. There's obviously some ways that you can win some prizes as well and interact with the rest of the conference. Looks like there's lots of other great sessions related to Microsoft AI, so I'd encourage you to check those out as well. Thanks very much.